This is Writers on Film, the only podcast dedicated to books on cinema. Hello everyone and welcome to the Writers on Film podcast. Today is a very special episode because I will be reporting live from the Sarajevo Film Festival, the 25th edition, which took place earlier in August, from the 12th to the 19th of August to be exact. It's my first time in Sarajevo as a city and my first time at the festival as well, obviously. It's an exciting place. Obviously, it's got a lot of historical significance, and I was excited to go and find out and have a look at where the bridge where Franz Ferdinand was assassinated with his wife, has to be said, because she never gets mentioned, although she lost her life as well. Have a look at the places such as the tunnel under the airstrip where during the siege of Sarajevo people were smuggled in and out of the city, as well as supplies of food and water and lots of things which were desperately needed, medical supplies, etc. In some of those missions where material was being smuggled in and out, there were also films, because during the siege of Sarajevo, during the Balkan War, the war with Bosnia and Serbia, then the film festival actually began, had its roots, had its seeds, were planted during a time of strife, during a time in which 300 shells were being launched at the city every day. And this is what really makes up my conversations at the festival. This is why this is going to be a little bit different. It's not really talking about the film so much. It's not even talking about specific films. It's more about how you run a festival, how important culture is in a time of suffering and strife, and political unrest, upheaval, and of course war. For this reason, I spoke instead of to fellow critics and writers. So, the Writers on Film format is being stretched to breaking point at this stage. But I think you'll agree it's a worthwhile conversation to have had. I first spoke to Jovan Marjanovic, who is the festival director, the new festival director. He's just stepping in to his role. He's been working for the festival for many years, but this is I think this is the first edition that he's actually a director of, but I might be mistaken about that, so don't quote me. Certainly don't tell Jovan if I've got that wrong. So first of all, you'll hear me talking to him about the festival and about how also the festival is helping to reach out to Ukrainian filmmakers and festival organizers in their own period of strife and war. If any place can feel solidarity with Ukraine at the moment, I believe Sarajevo is probably that place. After I've spoken with him, I will also be speaking to Edin Forto, the Prime Minister of the canton of Sarajevo, and so that is a fascinating conversation. He has a unique position in that he was, during the war, a student and then a journalist. He worked for the radio, and he lived under the siege again as the film festival was just about starting, and so he has fascinating insight into that, and he's done a great deal as a politician to promote culture in the city. So that's that is also probably one of the most interesting conversations I've had in a film festival. So I really wanted to share this with you. If you enjoyed the episode, please remember to like and share as far as you can. You could follow me on Twitter if you wish, Dr. Jonty, at Dr. Jonty, DRJONTY. But before you do any of that, let's just enjoy the conversation.
Okay, great. So, how's the festival going?
Very
so
well.
far?
It's been seems like a vintage edition already.
Right.
Great guests, a lot of interest. It's probably the biggest Sarajevo Film Festival in terms of audience numbers.
Right.
So good films, obviously, and some good reviews so far for the premiere films. Overall, I think very good.
Is it difficult as a balancing act to go for, you want to have your premieres, but you also want to have a mix, and you also want to have the public and the critics?
Excuse me.
Sorry, so the question was the balancing act between public and critics, premieres, and movies from elsewhere.
Yeah, I think we have the Sarajevo Film Festival has always done this balancing act. Our different programming sections reflect this. And really the heart of the festival are our competition sections, focusing on feature films, documentary films, short films, student films from the region of Southeast Europe. Mm-hmm. And this is where most of our world premieres come from. And we have 51 films from this part of the world in these competitions, making Sarajevo Film Festival probably the biggest programming of films from this part of the world anywhere. However, our more popular sections are obviously the open air section in one of our flagship venues, the open air cinema that fits about 3,000 people every night, and obviously these films are more audience driven and is kind of what's the best from the festivals in this year, etc. So, or the summer screen section showcases the best of films that deal with popular culture, with music, with teen and children's sections do exactly what it says on the can. So I think the programming actually has to be a mix of all these, because Sarajevo is both the festival for the city, for the audience in the city, and for the industry.
Right.
So this is the balancing act, and I think our focus on the region helps us do this in a good way, because we're not only focused on world premieres, so we're not thinking of ourselves as an let's say traditionally defined a festival.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So we think of ourselves as a festival which will showcase the best of Southeast European cinema.
Right.
So you will find films in our competition program which are not world premieres, which have, maybe they're a regional premiere, obviously. The films should not be shown in other festivals in the region. Many are, more than 50% are world premieres, but I'm saying we are not slaves to this concept.
Sure.
So we are sort of, the idea is to have the best of regional cinema, and without any prejudice, because we are still early on in the festival in that sense. A good example is there's a Croatian film, Safe Place, in the competition section. The film has just been to Locarno a week ago, where it won 3 awards. Let's see what happens here, obviously, but it's fantastic to have film being visible in 2 big film events, just one after another.
Yeah.
It creates a good synergy for this film, and obviously it doubles or triples the visibility for it, which is ultimately what we want in these competition sections. We want these films to go on from here. We want to discover. We want to send them, outside to the audiences and festivals internationally.
Right.
So it is. It is about putting it all together and trying to make it work for the benefit of the films and the filmmakers.
Sure. And what about the culture of film in Sarajevo? Because I was talking, my first time in the city, I was talking to people, and there's a real sense of, this is the best time of the year for Sarajevo. This is a big event for Sarajevo. So there's a real lively cinema culture, right? Is that? how you would define it, or how do you feel about it?
I think there's a lively festival culture.
Sure.
As well as cinema, but I think the festival is the driver. The fact that it happens annually and that it has been consistently developing over the past 28 years. So it has been interesting from the get-go. You know, you had this story of a festival, you know, starting during the war in a besieged city without electricity, without water. All of a sudden somebody's making a festival. It's a crazy story, it seemed to people outside. So there was a lot of support for the festival. So from the first edition of the festival was supported by some of the biggest names of European and global filmmakers, intelligentsia. You know, there was a lot of love and support for the festival.
Sure.
From the very beginning, and that this obviously with a dedicated team of people who was working on the festival, these two things combined, and a clear concept of where it can go, the festival was consistently growing over the years. So people in the city embraced it as something that's successful and theirs.
Right.
And they loved it for it. They felt that this is a time of the year where they're closer to, you know, to the cosmopolitan view of the city that they had, and that was, you know, in a way lost in the war, and then in the transition from, you know, one system to another, and all of these. So. Yeah, there's a lot of love for the festival in the city. It is a time of the year where everyone wants to be in the city, or they want to invite their friends and family over to visit because they feel they can, you know, show them around and have them have good time. And then, you know, you have also many people who come here for films only. You know, so it's a mix of cinephiles. It's a mix of people who want to have you know, good time, that want to see other people that they haven't seen in a while, etc. We have just tourists, which is more and more. Sarajevo is becoming a touristic destination for in summer. Also, I think thanks to a lively sort of cultural scene, including the festival, as sort of highlights of maybe sort of the peak of the summer season. So it all came together somehow. It all molded together in an interesting way, and I don't think anyone is losing there. You know, if you want to go for your avant-garde cinema, it's there.
Yeah.
If you want to go for your crowd pleaser with thousands of other people, it's there. If you want to go party, you can party.
Yeah. The whole spectrum of human life. So you're talking about the beginning of the festival and how it started in a besieged city. I mean, of course, nowadays we're looking at Ukraine and Russia and what's going on there. And is there, do you guys have a sort of particular point of view in looking at that and seeing a sort of similar situation of war and strife? I mean,
in Ukraine.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, does that sort of like your own experiences of coming out of that? Do you sort of look at that and think, okay, let's hope something else can?
No, that. It's so close to home. What's happening in Ukraine? It's so similar. It triggered a lot of people's, you know, memories of everything that's happening here. And overall, I mean, these are same mechanisms that were in force during the war here. You know, one country thinks that the other country should not exist, and okay, or regime in one country thinks that the other country will not. I'm not a politician, so let's not go into these sort of. But you know what I mean. It's similar in that sense, and of course it was very. We understood straight away what's going on, and as a festival, we tried to do what we can.
Right.
So we were, you know, there's only as much as you can do as being a film festival.
Right.
And we were focusing on, okay, so what can we do for Ukrainian filmmakers? What can we do for people who work at Ukrainian film festivals? So we did few very specific things that we thought could be helpful and that we would like that someone could have done for us back in the 90s. And one was, first of all, embrace Ukraine straight away as a cinema, as a country, into our focus, into our regional focus.
Right.
Because this means that everything that we do for the advancement of cinema in this part of the world now will include Ukraine. So
Right.
the competition programs, the talents program, the Cinelink Industry Days programming, all of our regionally based selections will include Ukraine, not just for this year, from now on.
Yeah.
So making this center also for their cinema. So it's another window to the rest of the world. And that's a very specific, concrete thing you can now, as a Ukrainian filmmaker, count on. Another call for projects, another possible funding opportunity, just more possibilities.
Sure.
And possibly something that's more tailor-made for them, right? So that's concrete and specific. And another thing is that we said, okay, so when you need to leave your country as a refugee, which we all know very sadly very well here, being able to do what you've been doing back home is probably the biggest help that you can get.
Right.
Because we've seen people who are doctors of medicine, going to whatever, be cleaners in hospitals, right? It's a common story. When they go somewhere as refugees. So the idea was, okay, so what are our colleagues in Ukrainian film festivals doing, and can they come and help us make the festival? So we created 2 job opportunities for them to come and work for a couple of months, 4 months, to be here in Sarajevo and work together with us. They're part of our team for this year. We opened up 2 residency programs for Ukrainian filmmakers with projects who also came to Sarajevo and spent some 3-4 months here working on their projects with consultants. One project is in development. It's a feature-length fiction film. The other one is a documentary in post-production. So it's about sitting here and editing. So again, a very concrete thing. And we're doing a panel on filmmaking during the war, which is something that sadly we have a lot of experience with here. So it's very similar, and I hope that a bit of the understanding that we have can be helpful in these little things that mean a lot. So
Okay, and finally, how do you envision the future of the festival? You say it's been consistently growing over the 28 years it's existed. Do you sort of have ambitions of it going further and further and further, or is there a sort of point that
I don't know this.
You don't want to lose sight of some core identity?
No, definitely the core identity has to be preserved. I don't see. I think this is pretty much the size of the festival. It's been another venue, another. Things change all the time.
Sure,
there will be things that we will stop doing, and we'll be doing something else. We try to adapt to the needs of the industry and to the needs of the audience, and we also try to dictate or anticipate some trends. So these 2 forces, they kind of they affect each other, and this is what we do. We really research what are the needs of the industry through meticulous data collection, through talking to people, through being parts of the industry. Most of us are producers or directors who are running the festival. So we kind of are inside, and but we also collect a lot of data and analyze it. So we like to say that we are data-driven with a curatorial touch in that sense. So, this tells you a lot about where the festival is, what's needed, what's not needed, and we change all the time.
Right.
So we're not stuck in terms of the formats. We're not stuck in this format saying, this is the only format that we can do.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we couldn't have survived the COVID years and doing these 2 editions where we quickly adapted and changed our ways completely. And both editions of the festival, 2020 and 2021, were successful editions in their own ways. They were different from what we have today because we didn't have the guests, people could not travel. And, 2020 we couldn't even have screenings because everything was locked. There was a lockdown. So, but then we moved online. But last year we, connected with the guests in a different way and organized things in a different way. But still, films were shown, meetings were held. Things happen that today are, turning into films or turning into, successful stories. Some didn't, but it's. I think this is the way forward. We have to adapt and anticipate. Adapt, anticipate, adapt, anticipate.
And then something like COVID comes along, and it's like, well, who anticipated that?
Yes, this no one anticipated.
Okay. What's your history? Because Miriam was telling me that you were a journalist originally, right?
During the war, I ended up at a radio station, then published a couple of articles for the local magazine, then worked with Miro Purivatra, who later formed the film festival, worked with him, and I ended up knowing a bunch of these people. And then after the war, I was in the US studying, but I would come back during the summer and worked 2 years for film festival, 99 and 2000. And it's like I consider Miro Purivatra, I consider him like a big figure in my life. He's and I love film. So
right. And you've always had this love for film since you were
Right. Somehow, from that period, I went to school to become a mechanical engineer, and that was and it was my first year, and I was 19. And then the war started, and I ended up with Miro and these other guys in the radio, and I end up in the among creative people, Susan Sontag comes in with Annie Leibovitz. They come during the war. They have an exhibition right here.
Right.
And then I end up interviewing her. And then I started, really digging into it. It's like I found another myself in another completely world. And it stuck with me.
How was that? I mean, how did that feel? Like, bombs are falling, grenades are going off. And
it was crazy. I mean, the whole thing was crazy. People were in shock when bombs started falling. Then after a while, people start getting used to it. Then they get out of basements. I'm saying civilians, fighters were already there in the front lines.
Right.
But civilians, they come out and they look for life. They look to shop. They look to get something to survive, because this, it lasted 3.5 years, and I was here for the first 3 years. And then it was funny, and a lot has been said about this. This hunger for creativity and for culture boomed. You could see every basement that could get any access to electricity, which was not easy. It would have a band.
Right.
And then theater plays, movie theater that Miro started, Mr. Purivatra, and I was with him there. And then everything packed. People wanted to come and participate. And so when the first film festival happened in '93, this is not affiliated with this one. This one started in '95, but this was like a war film festival organized by MES. MES, the theater festival.
Right.
It's an institution that has decades and decades of history. It's one of the best theater play festival in the region. But during the war, they said, why don't we make a movie festival? And then at one of the venues, now it's a supermarket or something. It used to be a movie theater. It's on an intersection, like this one.
Right.
And imagine people here trying to get into the movies, and here there's an anti-aircraft from the hill hitting the intersection, and nobody wants to move. They want to go in and see Kishlovsky's Blue, that's in French, without subtitles.
Wow.
And people just wanted to come in. It was really, really amazing. And I actually reported from this festival. Took statements from people, from local filmmakers and things. We had a little show on the radio about the festival. But everything was crazy. Someone dies, you move on. Things happen. You go to. It's completely insane.
And how are you getting films to show in the festival?
Usually the international community, UN.
Right.
Some people had access to travel, not many.
Right.
But so when you have connections, for example, person who owned my radio station where I worked for, Radio Zid, it's Zdravko Grebo. He was a professor with international connections, and then when he would go out and come in, I remember we would make a list of CDs we wanted him to bring, and I'm like, put Sisters of Mercy. They're like, no, they're not cool. We stick with grunge and everything else. Like, come on, give me,
I love
something.
Sisters of Mercy.
It was my favorite back then. They mocked me. It's not Sisters of Mercy. I'm like, fuck you, And this is how films would come in. Then we had a tunnel later when it was opened under the airport. And I recommend that you go and see.
We went yesterday and had a look at it.
That's how I got out of the city in '95,
Right.
and a lot of stuff started coming in through that. But mostly UN and internationals, they would help. Yeah.
Right, so they would bring in films.
People who could travel. The first. It wasn't a festival. It was like almost like a commercial showing of movies. Was at Ratno Kino War Cinema, run by Mr. Purivatra. It was VHS, someone brings VHS, and then we see, it was, I don't know, some blockbusters like Indecent Proposal. I remember creating an ad for the film or radio jingle ad, they'll come and see, and we were making ads like everything's normal. Come to the movies, see the movie, it's like, it was crazy.
So like no reference to the war or anything?
It's like come and see the movie.
Yeah.
And Ratno Kino Obala, it's like War Cinema Obala. And then I remember that was then Face Off.
John Woo.
Another Woo movie.
Broken Arrow?
With Broken Arrow, with Jean-Claude. And then, commercial stuff that you can, show. It's cool. Sometimes it's really poor quality. But who cares? And
how many people would be in the?
Well, this theater would bring in about 100, 150 people. It was a small. It was actually a scene for the Academy of Acting, where they would have their own, stage for classes.
Right.
They turned it into, the small projector. There were concerts there sometimes, exhibits. But at one point, the main purpose was, the movie theater.
Wow, that's amazing. And so nowadays, having the festival, and again, we've got war on the edges of Europe, in terms of Ukraine. How's that feel for you guys? Because that must be kind of quite triggering to see those images again on the news.
Well, like everything with the war, first days are the hardest. When bombing and when the aggression started in Ukraine, when Russians went in with tanks and started bombing civilian buildings, and we saw this on television, I felt a massive PTSD triggered.
Right,
here.
Right. Yeah.
People I know, people in my government, you see that they're really disturbed.
Yeah.
They go out of character, a person who, likes to make everything light and likes to tell a joke, they suddenly start saying, we need to get ready, like people people were crying. I went out of one meeting, it was related to Ukraine. I went to my office and on my own, I started crying uncontrollably, and I noticed everyone who's been through the war when the Ukraine aggression started. It was really massive reaction, and fear, and just emotions, and but today is already a little different,
Right.
like it used to be when we were at the center of this attention. In the beginning you have the attention, later you have to create attention. It's hard. It's harder and harder to tell people, hey, we're still dying over here. And so we try to make as many connections as possible. I know that the film festival has incorporated Ukrainian professionals and filmmakers, and they added films from Ukraine as if they were our region, which is Southeast Europe, which they're not. But it's a symbolic way of supporting them.
No, I mean that's amazing. That can also provide sort of an inspiration for the Ukrainians, in this period. And there is that contradiction between you want to show life is not there's you can get some sort of normality. Life goes on, but at the same time, this is not normal. We're not, we don't want you to forget that this is actually a war.
It's culture, at least during the war in Sarajevo, it was really I recognized it later when I got smarter. I was very young there. Was like a basic human need, and this is the extreme situation where you can actually see it.
Right.
It was a basic human need. People who would be in combat, they come back home for they want that. They want culture. They want something to hold on to. It becomes way of struggle, of resistance. And I think I'm sure that in Ukraine right now this is what's happening, especially in the hardest hit regions and cities.
Absolutely. Let's hope something, let's hope it doesn't last too long and something good can come of it.
Let's hope so.
And looking at the festival now, you've been instrumental in sort of helping grow the festival, and also making Sarajevo into a sort of kind of a cultural center. Do you want to just tell me a little bit about your actions and activity in terms
well, management of the festival is really smart. It's not an accident that the film festival is so successful for so long.
Right.
And it keeps growing, and it keeps surprising us in good ways. And even during the pandemics, they pulled it off. So there's a continuity of various levels of government supporting. So I don't want to say that we revolutionized government support, and we supported maybe more than before, but support is there. But what we've done that no one else has done, and I'm talking now about the cantonal government that I'm in, we really upped the amounts on grants for films. Record amount, 1 million km from our budget. This is grants for films as art projects, cultural projects. But then we started incentives for industry incentives for filming anything. And
commercial,
this is
whatever.
And this is like subsidies. We're the first ones doing this, and we started this program after discussing with the management of the film festival, because they go around and they campaign for film industry. And they talk to the telecom, they talk to other levels of government, and they talk to us, and they said, let's have these incentives for the industry. Let's do it. And we did it, and we're the only ones doing it. And last year we had one movie that we supported production. It's called Illyricum, and it's premiering tonight at the Cineplex. And we will have a press conference about it. We provided 300,000 km through incentive. I don't know if the film is good or not. We helped the jobs. that created the film. And this year we're going with 2 million km, and this is a big amount. And this is exactly what we promised to the film festival, that we would start as a government, so that the whole sector starts, pushing up with the domestic product. So I think, aside from actually helping giving the grant to the project and giving grants to films as cultural projects, this sector incentive, I think it's key for people to realize, okay, now I have a job in the industry. It's not just, culture is not a burden on the budget, it's investment. Like you give incentives for agriculture. We help us, we want to grow as well. So this is something where I'm trying to work on shifting the public awareness of that this is really necessary.
That economically it has
economic
positive feedback
narrative behind people watching movies. It's not just people watching movies for a week and having a couple of Hollywood people come in. It's the whole year of hard work, of production of local product, and helping people who are entrepreneurs in the cultural sector think that they have a chance here. They don't have to go to Belgrade, Zagreb, or London, or whoever, wherever people go.
They can stay here.
Yeah, you can stay here and try it.
What about your own taste in film? What stuff do you like to watch?
Well, growing up, because I grew up in socialist Yugoslavia, and we had only 2 channels, and you watch whatever is there.
Right.
So I'm really happy when there's a Hollywood movie and I know the intro, Metro Goldwyn Mayer. 20th Century Fox. When the Hollywood movie is coming.
Sure.
You have a better chance as a kid of enjoying. But I watched everything else. What it turned out would later turn out to be, some art projects from Italy and Germany and Hungary, and you grow up with stuff and then you develop the taste for everything.
Right.
But I would always love to see something that is brave and creative, but with an eye for commercial success. I always like someone who can do both.
Yeah.
And
who about in today's cinema, who would you sort of look to as you get excited when they've got a new film coming out?
I lived in New York.
Right.
I went once with a friend to see the movie was called now I'm blocked. They go in reverse.
Memento.
Memento. Yeah. And then later I found out, who's this guy? The Nolan, and his brother wrote the script, and someone based on short story. And this film stuck with me for a while. And then when he started coming with the more movie, he struck that, like with for example with what's the big movie when they go in other people's dreams?
Inception.
Inception.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a brave script.
Yeah.
When you go in and you. I remember in the movie theater, I remember a reaction of people for the first 5-10 minutes. It's like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
And what's going on? And the guy had a top cast. It's a very expensive project, and he was commercially hugely successful. And I always had a sweet spot for these types of projects.
Yeah.
Not all of them turn out to be that bad.
Yeah, sure, but I think Christopher Nolan is. I'm with you.
He's an example of someone who can do both things.
Yeah. Oppenheimer looks like it's going to be very good indeed. So.
Yeah. And then later I found out that he filmed this movie in between 2 Batmans. It's like, I have most of the cast. Let's do this for. He obviously knows how the whole thing functions.
Yeah. He's one of the sort of. I think in years to come we'll look back and say, okay, those are the masterpieces.
Well, Fincher. Regular usual suspects now, but in the beginning I'm like, these guys, they know what they're doing.
Yeah. They've kind of last 10-15 years become as you say, the usual suspects.
Yeah. But it's not how it started, you know.
No, Fincher was like...
Memento was low budget. You know?
Yeah.
Aronofsky, you know, but I met him here, you know, and he seems to be doing better with lower budgets. But he also can make something that goes, you know, for Oscars and awards and everything, and then have some commercial success with it as well, and bring the A cast. So
yeah,
he's also, he used to be one of these guys.
Yeah. And when you've had these big guests coming to Sarajevo, who was sort of it's a difficult question, I guess, but who have you been sort of most thrilled to meet?
Well, when I worked here in '99, I because I studied advertising,
right,
in the US, and because I knew Miro and everyone, I'm like, okay, let me help you about, you know, you're creating ads for festivals,
sure,
and I helped them there. But while I was in the war room with everyone else, and everyone is, you know, going nuts about too many things happening during the festival.
Yeah.
And I'm a person who is really not easy to I'm always calm in stressful situations. Right. And then Miro's wife, who's also in the management, she says, you need to come back next year and work with some of the people who we can't please, who are always upset. Like some people who are there was one guy who was one of the selectors of the festival, and they're like, you need to work with him because everyone says he's crazy, he's too demanding. You know, I've become best friends with this guy. He's like, he just wants things to be good, and he doesn't want, you know. So when I came back for the festival, and some of his guests were, you know, Daniel Defoe, Steve Buscemi. This is all in 1 year. Mike Lee. Darren Aronofsky, everyone was here at the same time. But the most sincere conversation I had was with Mike Lee, who was really just a super nice guy who wanted to know about society. He wanted to go through the bubble of film festival when everything is perfect, and wanted to know how things are when there's no festival.
Right.
And so his interest seemed genuine, and I really liked him. But generation-wise, I think, and you know, like the style, and the Darren was really, he was really good. Like, he's like, let's go party, you know, something like that.
Brilliant. And what about the future of the festival then? It's grown consistently. It's changed consistently. Is there something that you're not doing at the moment that you'd like to do in the future?
Well, this year is a key year because there's a transition in management.
Right.
You know, we have the new director, even though Jovan basically grew up with the festival.
Sure.
And it's not such a shock. But we need Miro to stick a while in as much as possible in consulting roles, so things doesn't start, you know, going south.
Right.
What they've been doing best is keeping it for the citizens. So, you know, the red carpet, people go through the red carpet and go see a movie.
Yeah.
We need to keep it for the citizens. The people need to be accessible during the festival. This is very important. It has to be, you know, we need to keep check on the glamour and the security.
Yeah.
One thing, I think they've been doing this successfully, and I want them to continue. But you know, Cinelink and the co-production scene is all the money needs to go there, because nothing is better than when, let's say, when the Romanian guy comes here as a young author to develop a project, and he spends good time here meeting people, and then 4 years later he wins Cannes. And he comes back with the movie, you know, and he's like, oh, I've been here, you know. And we've had this with the award-winning authors from Romania, from Turkey, from the region, who said, oh, I started in Sarajevo, and this dimension of the festival is not so public,
right?
But it's key, and they have to keep pushing that part, and I think the state needs to also take notice. And we need to, you know, push the money into successful projects, because they always bring back.
Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for talking to me. Really
Thank
good
you
to
so
meet
much.
Okay, so that was my conversation with Jovan and Edin. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you found it informative and interesting. I'm sure you did, because I think it was. If you didn't, what can I do? There's nothing I can do for you. Next week I will be at the Venice Film Festival, so I'm not entirely sure if I'll have an episode lined up before then. If I don't, there'll probably be a gap. And if I do, then this message will be redundant. Thanks ever so much to Elliot Atkins for providing the music, Ali Harwood for providing the art, and a thanks to you, dear listener, for continuing to listen to this podcast. So until next time, take care.